Welcome back to Beyond Stereo, the Dolby Atmos podcast. I'm Dan Bucknell, and here we talk about the world of immersive technologies aimed at creating more meaningful and emotional experiences for music, film, and everything else. Joining us today, we have Justin Melson, a filmmaker and visual effects artist, here to talk about the immersive world of visual effects in storytelling. Welcome, man. Thank you so much for jumping on with me.
Yeah, of course.
You want to just introduce yourself and just take us through how you got to be doing what you're doing.
Yeah. So I'm a filmmaker based out here in Atlanta, Georgia, and been filmmaking for a long time, about 15 years. My girlfriend and I, we just moved here about 2 years ago now. So it's been
Awesome.
Quite an experience, quite a transition, but I mean, love it. Came out here because one, the tax incentives are good for filmmaking. It's a booming industry out here, a lot of creative professionals, a lot of people you can collaborate with. So just figured, it could be a good step from Vegas, which is where I'm from. And so just enjoying it out here for now.
That's amazing. Yeah, cool. I remember, when we first connected, you told me you were in Vegas, and I think it was off the back of some short film or something that you had put out, and I reached out to you then. Do you remember what film that was?
I'm trying to remember. I can't remember if it was either Angora Road, which was like a war film, or it might have been way back. I did a bunch of films way back in the day. I did a lot of comedy stuff. And then I did recently just release a short film, which, I mean, that's too recent, so it wasn't that one. It must have been Angora Road, I think.
Yeah, it might have been. Yeah, I vaguely remember. Was it set in the desert? Was it that one?
It was, yep.
Okay. Well, I mean, you were in Nevada, so fair enough. But yeah, no, I remember that, and that was really, really cool. When did you do that one?
That one we did, we were in pre-production for a long time. So we were pre-pro all of 2016, most of 2017, shot it end of 2017, and released it early 2018, I think, for that one.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so I think you just released it.
Yeah, we did Indiegogo campaigns, behind the scenes trailers, and then we did, the only other film that I could think of that we had that much of a campaign leading up to the release was this old one that we did called The Last Hotspot. It was also set in the desert. It was like a post-apocalyptic comedy skit. So
cool.
That one was 2015. So maybe it could have been that one too.
It might have been that. Whatever it was, it caught my attention. And it was really cool because I'm all the way over here in Melbourne, Australia. And we'd never met before. We never really spoke too much. But then obviously, from that, I kind of was like, that's cool. And I need to meet that guy. And then we just, chatted a little bit. And then I've just been following your journey ever since. So what have you been doing now, man? What's the recent thing?
Yeah, so I would say for the last however many years it's been, man, just I do a lot of documentaries now. That's kind of my bread and butter for paid work. I run a production company. So a lot of things I do are commercials, or they end up on television. I'm doing a documentary literally right now as we're talking. I'm editing that one. We're going to put that one on TV. So a lot of sports docs, just really documentaries on a whole bunch of topics. And then in terms of my filmmaking career, we've been working on a film for a long time called The Monsters We Carry, and that's going to be my debut feature film. We've been working on the script for a long time, and we did a short film that we just put out on the channel.
I saw that.
And
I did see that.
Yeah, and so that's been a long project because for me, from a directing standpoint, I don't want to, the writing is where it really comes together. The script needs to be sharp. It's got to be a solid script. So my writing partner and I, we've been really trying to go in and make it the best script we can before we start going out and looking for investors and developing it and trying to give it some legs.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, that was very exciting to watch the short. It was proof of concept, I guess, and very exciting. So if anyone who's watching this, go check that out. All right, so I'm gonna get into something. So I want to go way back, man. I want to go way back. How was the start of all of this for you? Where did you find the love for filmmaking?
Man, so that goes. You're right. That is way back.
Way back.
For me, I would say the start was when I was really young. Sometime around elementary school, early middle school. Long story short, it's just my brother and I and my mom's, so single mom raising two kids. As you would expect, we didn't have a ton of money growing up. So it was one of those things where we would just be at home all the time. It would either be at the skate park skateboarding, which the skate park was down the street, or we'd be at home. And
you're a really good skater too, right? Like you've been doing that a while. I've seen there's videos of that somewhere too. Go check that out. Continue.
Oh yeah. No, I mean skateboarding pretty much my whole life, and
that's awesome.
Yeah, and so essentially what ended up happening is like we wouldn't even have gas to go places. We would just be at home all the time, and so. With that said, when we got grounded, there wasn't too many things for our mom to even take away, like as punishment. So what she ended up having us do is movie reports. And so a bunch of movies that I never, as a kid, would really see myself watching. Like it could be Thelma and Louise, it could be Paper Moon, it could be Gladiator, just a whole bunch of movies, Air Force One. You know, there's tons of movies that I would never sit down as a kid and watch. I'm like, why would I watch that? I want to watch something like Lord of the Rings or something. And she would make me watch these movies and do a report on them. And in doing that, I was like, I'm gonna sound so crazy, but for a long time I thought movies were real. Like I thought they were just real things. Like this really happened. And then I'm like, wait, how are they doing this? And she was like, oh, there's cameras, there's lights, there's sound, there's like people putting this all together. And she's like, see how it cuts back and forth between the people? And I'm like, oh, wow, I never noticed that. Whenever I watch a movie, I just thought I'm just watching people live, that's just what
like a documentary that you now are making.
Yeah. So I was just like, how do you do that? And so I started learning how to edit with our VCR. Like I would take our old PlayStation and like the little RVC cables or whatever and try to cut using the PlayStation and all kinds of stuff. And eventually I learned Windows Movie Maker. That transitioned to like some other editing software. I was doing like little PowerPoints on Microsoft Paint. And then eventually
I did the same thing.
Oh, really?
That's so cool. Yeah. I made a whole scene of like Titanic where the guy gets flown out of the window. I did all of that animated on PowerPoint slides.
That's crazy. One of my favorite movies in the whole world is Signs, directed by M. Night Shyamalan. It's like a alien movie, or no, it's more of like a not faith movie, but it's an alien invasion movie. And Definitely. I was obsessed with that movie. So I was like, I need to make a sequel. So I did the same thing. I was like drawing little awesome. Aliens and doing the whole thing on PowerPoint and Paint. So with all that said, eventually I learned like, okay, got a camera. The camera recorded on tape. I can't import tape into a computer because it's not an SD card. So I'm like filming the TV and cutting. It was like just all kinds of weird stuff. And then eventually, once I learned the basics of importing stuff into a computer, throwing it in Movie Maker, I came across this website called videocopilot.net, which is this guy, Andrew Kramer. He's a visual effects legend. He's amazing with Adobe After Effects. Came across his work, and then filmmaking just turned into visual effects. I was just obsessed with learning visual effects. I was doing just all kinds of VFX tests, and so then I started doing skits with my friends once high school came around. And, these skits had no substance in terms of story or anything. It was just like a reason for me to test certain VFX. And so that ended up just being what sparked it. I'm like, how do you do a meteor? How do you do this? How do you do that? How do you do a demon face? Or something? Yeah, something like that. Yeah. And then I'm like, but we need a little story to lead up to the effect. So then we would just shoot all kinds of fun stuff. And then eventually graduating high school and moving forward, I'm like, okay, I should probably learn like how to write and actually how to make a story if I want to be a director. Because before it was just being a VFX artist. And I learned, as cool as that is, I actually want to tell stories. And so I graduated in 2013. From that point on, and 2024, about to be 2025 now, been honing the craft of directing and trying to be someone who can learn everything. So editing, color grading, sound, directing, cinematography, kind of hone it all, but then master direction and directing actors and storytelling.
Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, I think I've spoken to a lot of people about this idea that, probably the best directors all come from some other thing that they were really good at and sort of turned into directing. That happens a lot. So I mean, like, that's really cool that you've got the groundwork of the visual effects and obviously all of that experience doing all of those things, and then you've kind of used those to better understand directing and writing and all those, where it all comes together, I guess. So that's really awesome. I'm just gonna get super nerdy for a second here, just while we're on it. What's like the hardest visual effect that you ever attempted, and what's your favorite technique, just for fun?
That's tough because I was really into VFX when I was younger. In recent years, I really haven't touched it, but there was, oh man, that's a really good question. At one point, I was really into doing 3D stuff. Like I was in 3ds Max doing all kinds of things, and I don't think they looked any good because frankly now the VFX tools are so good now that people can do it way easier in Blender than it was 15 years ago, like doing camera tracking. So I'd have to go into, what was it, Buju or something, and I'd have to do a 3D planar track or 3D track in Buju, export that data into 3ds Max, but then like the plane and the axes would be different in 3ds Max. You'd have to invert it because the y-axis wasn't where the y-axis really is. Like all kinds of complicated stuff. And by the time I did all of it and composited it in After Effects, it was like just so. But it was one of, I would say.
Well, it was a learning curve though.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, but the ones I'm proud of are actually aren't that difficult to do. They were just very laborious and tedious. When I was really young, before I even had like a bunch of friends in high school, I was acting in my own stuff too, but it was just myself. So I'd just do clone videos all the time. So it would just be me acting against myself. And so it'd just be a ton of rotoscoping, a ton of me timing my actions. And then learning how to do camera movement. Like, okay, because it's so simple to do a clone effect, right? You just put the camera on a tripod, split it in the middle. But then if you're like, what if you want the camera to do a 2D move? I'm like, oh, okay, how do you do that? You do a set extension, zoom it in, film the camera shake, offset, and then extrapolate that camera data and put it on there and match the motion blur and everything. I'm like, what if you want a 3D camera move doing that? Like, what if you want a dolly with the clones? And I'm like, okay, now you need like a motorized slider or something to do that. But I'm like, okay, I don't have the budget for that. I'm in high school. So then finding like creative ways to do a 3D camera move with clones and things like that. I'm proud of those, but I don't use those tools anymore. But it kind of goes into what I was saying earlier. I know I have that in my back pocket. So even when I try to pursue larger budget films now, I know I'm like, this is possible. I've done it before.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's so cool. Like, I think the whole point there is that, you know, the grand effects aren't always the most impressive. Sometimes it is the simple thing, or it's just to tell the story better. That's the thing that carries more weight, right? Like if you didn't have other actors, so you just used yourself, just being creative because you had to, and then, you know, you found a way to do that. Like that's the best effects, you know? I can liken that to something as simple as Forrest Gump, the feather, right? You know, the feather at the end? Mm-hmm. That's the most simple, weirdest thing to like spend a lot of time on, but they like put so much effort into making sure that looked that way. But that's something that, you know, really drives the story. It's something that is, you know, it's very based on like the perspective of him and that whole exit. And it's like, it's a feather and it's just literally coming up off the screen, you know, that's all it is. And so much effort into the effects like that. But then if you swap it around, it could be something as simple as, you know, destroying the video so that it looks like old footage to place him into like archival real footage of, you know, like the president and stuff like that. And those kind of effects, it's like for the story. So it's probably simple to do. Like it was very meticulous the way they did it. However, that could have been pretty easily done to just kind of, degrade the footage and do different little things. So not necessarily how hard it is. It's the reason. I think the reason is what makes it matter.
I think you bring up a really good point. Like with the feather, for example, like you said, it's so simple. It's just I think they start the movie and end the movie with the feather and it lands at his foot, and then it ends the movie with it at his foot and it flows up into the sky. But it's the meaning behind the effect. Like that feather symbolizes really his life of just going with the flow and just going with everything. And so it wasn't just a meaningless effect of, which I think the way they did it, I could be wrong, is it was a CG feather until it landed at his foot. And then it was, they painted out the real feather until the CG one landed right on the real one. And then he could interact with it.
You said it perfectly. Like that's a much better way to talk about that. Like it really does, you know, symbolize him at its core. That whole thing is, you know, it really is the meaning behind the effect that makes it matter, not how grand the effect necessarily is. So it's a really cool thing to talk about there. But from effects, let's just move on to, you know, say storytelling in a more general way. So when you started writing, what was like the method from understanding, okay, I got some cool technical skills, but now I need to like make them matter, right? Like what we were talking about. What was the first step to getting that happening for you?
So for me, I was never, which is funny enough because I wanted to be a writer before I got into filmmaking when I was really young, and then that completely fell off once I picked up the camera. But I would never consider myself a natural writer. Like I don't read all the time, which is something I'm always trying to get better at. But it's one of those things where once I did start learning how to write screenplays and learn story structure and learn how things work. Because before I was just going about things completely random. I was like, okay, well, you need to tell a story. So I want to do a 15-minute short film on the Wi-Fi apocalypse. Okay, what's something funny, and just kind of write something around that. And while that did work, now that I'm more mature and older, and if I look back at my old work, there was no structure, and the dialogue was very on the nose. There was no subtext. There's none of that stuff. Right. It's just kind of like, if the character's thinking this, then he says this, which, to be fair, I was like 18, 19. And so back then, I always just took writing as, okay, format the screenplay, make sure the names are in all caps and this and that, and make sure this stuff is like this, and make sure the actors can understand the lines, and all right, let's go. But now, after reading more books, for one, on story structure, exposition, and yada, 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 it's way more than that, especially us writing our first feature film. It's been a wealth of knowledge in just learning that, because it's so tempting for, if your character is stressed or your character is upset, it's so tempting to just write, I'm so angry, but no one says that in real life.
Explicit.
It's like,
that's right.
Yeah, it's like the character would just maybe just smirk, or just like maybe not say anything. They might just look at, but it's so hard to not write anything. So I would say, right. It's one of those things where, for me, learning how to less is more, and it's so tempting to just fill the page, especially like if you come from a novel writing background. You want to put all these descriptions and actions, and it's actually less is more, and you want to have it, which typically I direct my own films, and so I don't need to make the script super director friendly, but you want to make it director and actor friendly. You don't want to put a bunch of descriptions and like how the actor should feel and all these things, like just make it a skeleton. And then when you're on set with the actor, they can interpret the lines how they are, because the actors are pros. Yes. Like, I'm not an actor.
Well, that's right.
I shouldn't be telling them what to do. Like,
Yeah, for sure. Well, I suppose that, that's the collaborative, thing about the filmmaking. Like the story is sort of king, as we say. And then, that someone on the podcast recently said, Luke, actually, go check out Luke C. Jackson's episode if you haven't already. He was talking about, the script is kind of this perfect representation, or it should be, of what you're intending to do, right? And then you sort of go through all of that, and you work with the actors, and they kind of bring their thing to it, and then it evolves and levels up to something else. And it could be still representing what you're intending, but it's the next level of that, because they've now brought all of their thing, and then all the technical stuff happens in the editing, and it's the same again. It evolves, and all with the intention of getting back to what you had at the start, which is the story coming out as it should, and that's sort of the end game. But that collaborative juice, that happens on set, like, you got to let the actors do what they do, and bring their own thing to it. I think that is a big important thing. But I think varying degrees, depending on directors. I've just seen, it's different every set I go on, and I'm not usually on set. I'm post-production mostly, but some directors really love to like work with the actors a lot to make sure it's exactly as they want it, and others kind of let it go, well, let's just play it out, see what you do, and then I can kind of direct you after that, yes or no, or more or less, or whatever. So what's the way that you typically like to do it?
Personally, for me, I find that kind of the latter. I like having the actors take full control, and then I can tweak from there. I've learned, especially as I've gotten older, I get way more overwhelmed because I'm doing a lot of roles. Like, I'll be a DP, aka cam op, like I'll be operating the camera. Sometimes I'll be gaffing and gripping, so I'll be setting up lights. Producing, I'll literally have people texting me, and I'll be doing budgetary things while I have the camera on my shoulder. So there's a lot going on, and it's gotten to the point at times where I'll be setting up lights, setting up scenes, setting up everything, coordinating with people, getting everything down, and then I'm like, action. And the actor's like, what are we doing? I'm like, oh, that's right. I didn't do the directing part. So I'm like, all right. So for me, I personally like working with actors that are immensely talented to the point where I don't have to hold their hand as much. I have a few friends I can name off the top of my head. My friend Destiny, she lives in LA. My friend Dylan, he lives in LA. Dylan, you've probably recognized him in some of my older shorts. those two in particular are like masters at their craft in terms of getting into character. So I like working with actors that if you give them a character and you give them a script, they can go in their own lair, whether that's in their apartment or wherever it is, and they can dissect that character and just do all the groundwork. So by the time whether they fly in or they drive in and they're on set, like my friend Dylan will literally like walk onto set with a limp, and he doesn't have a limp, but he's like so in character, he's ready to go. And he just makes me laugh because I'm just like, all right, action, and he just has this accent and like an accent I've never heard him do before, and he just nails it, and I'm just like, oh man, thank God for you, because I'm like I'm like so overwhelmed with everything else, I don't really know what exactly I'm going for yet, but because him or my friend Destiny or just any other talented actors I've worked with have already done so much groundwork, all I need to do is just be like, hey, let's just lean off of this, or maybe don't interrupt each other so much, because as a post sound editor, if people overlap each other, it's hard to cut the audio. It's like I need clean audio so I can overlap and do all that kind of stuff, or don't blow out your mic or whatever. So it's like they're professional. So all I have to do is worry about the technical part, the emotional beats and blocking and editing, and the talent and skill set. They have that covered completely. So to answer your question, I love working with actors where I don't have to do too much. I don't have to hold their hand. They do all the work for 2 weeks prior, and they come in on set and just nail it. And I'm just like, so good.
Yes, that's job done. Yeah, for sure. I prefer that as well. I haven't done too much directing, a little bit, but when people bring their own little flavor and they understand the story, and this is the importance of pre-production, I guess, as well. But, you can sort of do a lot of that groundwork of, hey, look, this is kind of what I'm going for. And then you run with it, Mr. Actor, and they kind of bring their flavor. That's kind of what you want. That's I would say as well that when there's like two types of, like when you're booking an actor or casting, there's kind of two ways to think about that for me. And one is, say, somebody who is extremely versatile and can bring on a character and build something. Somebody like Johnny Depp, who can be anything. He can be Edward Scissorhands, or it could be Ed Wood, or it can be, it's like there's a million different things he can do, and they're all completely different, very dramatic differences between characters. And then there's somebody else, who has a certain thing that they're known for, or is like, I could think of like Christopher Walken or something. He's got the accent, he's got that thing that he does, is a certain type of comedy, and if you want that in your movie, then you get him for that. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of two different ways of thinking about booking actors. I wondered if you have that, in the way that you work, is that a factor as well? Are you, hiring people to be the thing that they are sometimes? Or is it mainly, trying to build something? What's the easiest for you?
And I would say that's a great question. I would say it's a hybrid of both. So for me, before the talent or the kind of character they typically portray, like you mentioned, like let's say a Jim Carrey is kind of known for doing Jim Carrey type things. For me, I like also going with people that I know are easy to work with. It's almost like, a lot of directors do this, like a Chris Nolan consistently hiring like Cillian Murphy or Michael Caine. Like there's certain directors that love recalling certain actors for different roles because they just have a great synergy. And so for me, before I even go into, can this person play the right role? It's, am I going to get along with this person? Because I don't like to be passive in terms of directing. I don't like to be like, hey, I'm kind of going for this and that's it. Like I like to be really involved. And sometimes most people I work with don't have egos, but let's say if someone has an ego, or let's say someone's like, hey, like you're texting me too much, you're hitting me up too much. And I'm like, hey, like I really like to be involved. And so the first thing is, are we compatible? Are we going to have a good time? Because at the end of the day, like when you're filmmaking, it should be a good time. Like even if you're doing something that's a stressful subject matter, it's fun. Like it's art and it's something that we get to do. So like, let's have a good time. And if we're going to have a good time, then I'm like, okay, this person, even when I'm casting and I'm going off of people's demo reels and everything, or I'm going off of I look people up, I look at their Instagram, I look at their Facebook, I'm like, who is this person? Are we going to have a good time to work with? And I've misjudged that a few times in my career, unfortunately, and it bit me hard the few times I did. So I'm really adamant on that, making sure we're good to work with. And then from there, I'm like, can you play this character If not, sometimes I'll rework the character in the script to match the actor that I want to cast. Or I'm like, can I see just based off this person's reel, do they have the skill set to be able to embody this character, even though it's something they've never done before? Like they could be a completely really humor-driven actor. And it's like, do you think you could do an intense drama scene where you have to do these things? And they might be like, I'm not sure, but it's like, well, let's give it a go. And oftentimes they do nail it, you know?
That's awesome. And I think, giving people the potential or the opportunities to, evolve themselves as well and try new things. And especially when with that art in, sort of the reason we're doing anything is because we love this and we want to tell this story in the most authentic, cool way. And you only get that from people enjoying what they're doing. So, I completely agree with you, man. I was going to ask as well, because I can see a little bit of tech there. I'm seeing is that a DaVinci Resolve color grading tool? So you do a lot of post work then as well, like not just the visual effects now. We're talking the editing and the grading. And when did you start doing sound? And how far have you gotten with that? Because that's my world, so I want to know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know. Oh man, we could probably go down a rabbit hole with some sound. I'm nowhere near as educated on it as you, but I mean, for me, it's just like what I mentioned earlier with my story, just kind of learning how to do everything. So I've been mixing my own short films. I've been mixing, when I do corporate work, anything from corporate commercials or anything like that. I haven't had the luxury, at least not yet in my career, to have a team of people where one person handles color, one person handles the post sound and does all the EQing and everything, and someone else does this, and I just have to worry about the edit. So for me, typically the clients that I have right now and the work I've done and the short films I've done, budgetary wise, I'm like, I typically do everything unless something is completely way out of my wheelhouse. Like in Monsters, there was one particular scene, the short film that we did, that I was like, I just can't mix this. So I outsourced that to someone else. But in terms of my kit, I got the DaVinci Resolve color grading panel because, great for coloring. Got a 3-monitor setup, so I have everything ready to go there. And I got my studio monitors. They're kind of the cheaper ones, the JBL
305s or 306s probably.
Probably.
Yeah, sweet.
Yeah, I mean,
how do you find those?
If I'm going to be real with you, I find them they're a little muddy, like they're a little kind of dull. Like I can't hear my ranges too well. So for example, when I edit on headphones and again, I don't consider myself a pro audio mixer, but I've mixed enough to know the basics of like, okay, like when I'm doing my de-essing and my equalizing and compressions and everything, I know what I'm looking for. And I've noticed with these, like my girlfriend, she was just, because she has fresh ears, I'll have her listen to my mix and she's like, I can't really hear it too much. And I'm like, I promise it doesn't sound like you can't hear the highs at all. And I'm like, when someone does when I add some reverb and delay and everything, like I kind of like a higher pitch and you just can't hear it with these, especially compared to having headphones in. So
what headphones are you using?
These ones are Sony MDR 7506. So there's some old ones.
Beautiful. Cool. Oh, dude, whatever works, man. Like that's the thing. Just a little tip there. If you do wanna, if you're in the market for some new monitors, the Adams, I swear by them, man. Like Adam Audio, they have incredible monitors. And they're actually, this is not a commercial for Adam, but they've got the tweeters, the ribbon tweeters. So they have that super top end. And it's crystal clear, dude. I've got a Dolby Atmos setup with like just the T series, which is like the bottom of the range, and they're still very, very good though. But the T series 5-inch monitors all round, and they've got a subwoofer as well, the T10. And honestly, I love them. And they're so crisp, and the high end is like beautiful. So,
well, coming from you, who is an actual professional, if you're saying they're really good monitors, then they must be really good monitors. I know it's not a commercial, but I'm gonna look them up.
Like, dude, you should. Like, I think the JBLs, a lot of people do use them, but yeah, I it's not that they're bad. They're just like different, And I think I'm used to these now, and it's because at the time when I was building the Atmos room, I knew I was going to need a lot of them. So I was like, I'm not going to pick a bunch of studio monitors that are too expensive and I'll price myself out of doing this. And, but they still need to kind of be, what I need for like mixing dialogue is like so important, right? I need to be able to hear all of that. And then I'm bass managing everything anyway through the Atmos system. So it's like I've got the subwoofer to get the low end, and because they're only 5-inch monitors. Honestly, I can't fault them. They're great, and I have 2 more in my office here. So total, I've got 16 of them.
Oh, wow.
15, and that's because I've got the 914 at the studio, and then I've got a pair in my office as well. So crazy, dude.
I have a few. I don't know if you want to get into this later, but I have a few questions for you regarding. So for you, like at your studio, how does that work? Having a Dolby Atmos certified studio, like how does that work?
Well, not certified, but I mean, if in terms of the certification process, which definitely was a thing, it used to be that to do anything, Dolby would have to come out and certify your room, so they're checking the acoustics and the full range of your system and making sure that it's consistent with what the quality they want to put out. But yeah, that's kind of not a thing anymore. When you're mixing for theatrical release, it definitely is a thing, and then you have to pretty much be at a certified dub stage to put out theatrical mixes in Atmos. But pretty much with everything else, it's not even required. So you can literally do what I've done and build a studio in your living room. And as long as it's calibrated and you're tempting as high as possible, you can make amazing things and use Dolby Atmos for what it is, all the way for, streaming, everything. Yeah, DVD, Blu-ray, all of that stuff, and how it scales down. I think DVD is only 5.1. Blu-ray allows Atmos. Streaming, most of them are Atmos now. So yeah, it's actually not that difficult. Like, people think that it's this super hard, expensive thing, and it can be. It doesn't have to be. Lots of people are doing it quite affordably. So yeah, I would never go back though. So what other questions do you have? Because I don't know if I answered that properly.
No, I mean, so when it's Dolby Atmos, for example, you have 5.1 surround sound. Does that count as Dolby Atmos, or is it more? Is it 7.1?
It is more.
Or is it more?
Yeah, okay, I see. So the whole thing with Dolby Atmos is, so it's a step above traditional surround sound. And the reason is because surround sound and even stereo are very similar in that they're channel-based. So channel-based meaning you have 2 channels, left and a right. Or 5.1 is 6 channels, so left, center, right, 2 surrounds and a sub, or LFE, dedicated sub-channel. With 7.1 you introduce sides or rears, so you got even more sort of places where you can put things in that sort of circular thing, if you sort of think of it like that. You've got speakers all around you, so when you pan things, it feels like more pinpoint accuracy to hear where everything's coming from. With Atmos, though, we add the height channels. So it's another dimension above the circular speakers around us. We now have the ability to put sounds above. But also the reason it is different is because it's no longer based on how many channels. It doesn't matter. So the way we're achieving that is using what's called object-based audio. So that is like coordinates within a 3D space, and we're mixing sounds into coordinates within this cube representation that we get with the renderer. And instead of going, this sound is going to go in this speaker, you're doing it, this sound is going to go in this position in a cube. And then it is played on a system in that place approximately and scales to whatever the system is. So you could be playing on a stereo system, 5.1, or anything, 50 speakers, whatever, and it will place that sound in the appropriate place for the system you're listening on. So essentially, it removes the technology completely. The problem of, with 5.1, you used to have this thing where if you've only got stereo and you're playing a 5.1 file, you're going to lose 4 channels. Your dialogue's gone, the surrounds, the sub, nothing. You're just getting the music and maybe some effects, because it's just the left-right channels, in that 5.1 mix. So that's not a problem anymore. It just scales down perfectly, one mix, and you get everything. So that's the reason for Dolby Atmos. Does that answer your question, actually?
It does. I have one more question / clarification. So when I think of that, I think I understand where, again, when with a traditional 5.1 or stereo mix. So for me, for example, 90% of what I do is stereo. So I just do left-right channel. I do my pan or whatever. And then when you're doing a 5.1, that would make sense. So it sounds like, I don't think this is exactly what it is, but when I think of spatial audio, if that's what it's called.
That's exactly what it is, yeah.
So when I have my AirPods in, I could kind of hear it's not in a left or a right, or, you know, it's like I feel like I'm there, and when I move this way, the audio is kind of getting closer, further away in its own three-dimensional space. Is that similar to what
that's
that
exactly? Well, I mean, that is that's the consumer version of what Dolby Atmos makes. So essentially, spatial audio, and you sort of started on the head tracking thing. So that's where, if you think of, you know, the speakers in front of you, like just left, right, even, and then we go, all right, if I move my head like this, then I can hear more of one. So the head tracking thing follows your head and allows that to feel real. So it's like kind of emulating being in a space rather than being on headphones. And then, the other thing is, you know, it does it with surround as well. So a sound that is mixed into the surround, or the, you know, the height channel or whatever, will sound like that. Kind of like how our ears work. You know, if you think about that, how they do this is with like a human head-shaped microphone that has, you know, very similar patterns to how our ears work. Because we can detect sounds coming from any direction, right? Like if you sort of click around your head, you can tell where that is. And it's because, you know, both ears are hearing it. One is slightly delayed on the other side. And the difference in the EQ curve, as you move around, it's really clear because your ear is facing the front. And then as you go behind you, it's a bit darker. And then, you know, subs as well. So low end travels much further because of the bigger waves. You know, it's just physics. And that's why, you know, at a concert, you only hear the sub first, right? Outside a club, doof, doof, that's all you hear. Or a car going past, you know, with the music loud, you just hear the sub. That's because of that too. So what this does in the binaural or the head tracking that you're talking about is it sort of uses that technology to recreate an approximation of what surround sounds like, but only for two speakers, which is closed back headphones essentially, or AirPods. So yeah, basically, just to finish off the Dolby Atmos thing, the main point is to create a deliverable that works everywhere, so you don't have to have separate mixes to sell separate things, basically, like we used to. So there would be the stereo version of the song, and then if you needed to use it in a movie, you'd have to upmix that or remix it in 5.1 or 7.1 or whatever. And then, you know, you'd have that version, which you would need a 5.1 playback system to play it back, the 5.1 version. Now with Dolby Atmos, it's just one file. It has all the metadata within it, and then that transfers on all the decoders that, you know, everyone's got in their phone. It's everywhere. There's cars with it. There's phones. There's, you know, pretty much every home system now is you know, capable of decoding Dolby Atmos, or at least the JOC, which is like a 5.1 backup in there as well. So even if you can't decode Dolby Atmos with an older, you know, player like a soundbar or something, it'll still give you the 5.1 option. So that's cool too. And yeah, you can pretty much play this stuff anywhere and get the most out of what you've already got, rather than having to purchase a whole nother thing. And it's not really about, you know, hearing it in its full glory of Dolby Atmos, as much as, you know, you can hear it at all with one mix, easier to promote, that kind of thing. So that's really the whole thing with that.
That's super interesting. Man, what are your thoughts on, I know you said you've done some directing, but you do way more audio, post audio. I'm actually curious a bit more on your story, like how you got into post sound.
Sure. Well, it's funny actually. I'm actually gearing up to do a full episode about this, so it'll just be me, you know, docoing myself, but which is funny. But essentially, like how it started, and there'll be more detail in that one. But how it started was I've always been, you know, doing music and in bands and writing my own music and stuff like that. And then I started just exploring other things, like I wrote a book, which is a science fiction, you know, thing, and it very quickly turned into, now I want to take that further and write a second book, and then a third book, and then it became a series, and it's massive. And then basically I was like, that's not enough for me. A song is not enough for me. I want more. What is this? What is this thing that I need to do? So I kind of thought, well, all of those things that I love together, well, what does that equal? Probably a film is what it is. It's the storytelling. It's words, you know, but also experience, you know, an experience with audio, and then, you know, surround sound and all the epicness of all that. So I thought, well, I need to make a movie. All of it started to try and do that, and I kind of found a career along the way doing audio, because I was always doing that anyway. I just figured, well, while I'm trying to do that thing for myself, I'll work on other people's films and I'll get good at that. And then it kind of just evolved from there. So that's my journey into it all and how I sort of got into it. But yeah, there'll be a whole episode on it, guys, if you want it.
I'm looking forward to listening to that episode because I'm sure I know that was a very quick overview on how you got into it. So I'm sure there's way more fine detail that you left out. So I'm looking forward to hearing that.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, the filmmaking thing in general is always trying to tell a story, even with ads. And that is an interesting one I would love to get your thoughts on too, because you do a lot of, adverts and stuff like that too. So one of my favorite things is that immersion that we're looking for, right? And we don't see that in ads typically. When you're making stuff like that, is that something you're going for as well? How would you sell something with emotion?
That's a great question. I do agree that no one likes being sold to. And I remember, I don't know if I heard or read this recently, that when someone's in a movie theater and the lights go down, everyone's IQ jumps like by 25%. Like everyone's smarter. And it's one of those things where people can see what's going to happen in the movie before it happens. Like everyone's trying to predict, everyone knows, everyone's like, I know what this character's going to do, what this character's going to say. When you go on YouTube and you see an ad, 95% of people are aware of the tactics that people are using for your retention, right? Like when someone's like,
yeah,
don't click this video because I have some big tip for you. And you're just like, no, you don't click, it's like, I get it. It's so
people, they're definitely getting smarter now. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And so I feel like everyone has different techniques. Like some people do something obnoxious to get audience retention. Some people do loud. Some people have all kinds of different ways to do it. But similar to your question, what's worked for me and what I really, really love is when I see ads that create, like you said, that provoke some kind of emotion. And I can think of one that got me really good. It didn't make me cry, but it inspired me to make an entire short film. There's this extra gum commercial that came out 2016, and it was I think they had multiple variations. They had like a 30-second spot, a 15-second spot, and a full 2-minute short film. And I remember I saw the 30-second spot, and one, it was just beautifully done. It was shot, Alexa, very professional. It's extra, so like a nice agency did it. But everything about it was just well done, from the direction to just casting, everything. I was like, wow, found the full short film. Turns out many people felt that way because it had 15 million views on an extra gum commercial. And I was like, okay, it's not just me. People felt something. And they had this rendition of a Elvis Presley song playing. And I was like, wow, I'm not feeling like I want to cry because there's so many different emotions that you can get from watching something. But I'm like, I feel inspired. I want to make something maybe not as good as this, but something that makes me feel like this. And so that's when we went on the journey. We created our film in Gore Road. And that was a 2-year process because I saw that commercial. And there's so many other times when I've seen 30-second commercials that are just so well done so quickly. And sometimes it's just, and this as a sound engineer, sometimes it's just the right music with the right sound design, with the right visuals. And maybe it's just someone saying something and you're like, really hit me. And I'm like, I didn't think I needed to buy that brand of Q-tips, but now all of a sudden I want to because that commercial made me feel something. So I really do think that if you can hit that emotional core, which is similar to what you said and what you want to do with, or not what you want to do, but what you already do with your brand and your company, that's something that inspires me with my films, is if you can just get some kind of an emotion out of someone, whether it's horror, whether it's sorrow, whether it's happiness or laughing or whatever it is, if you can get something out of your audience, then people are going to remember it. There's so many movies I've seen where I walk out of the theater and I'm like, 2 weeks later, I forgot I watched the movie because it just didn't get anything out of me. Versus you could watch a movie that maybe Rotten Tomatoes gives it a 35%, but if that movie made you feel something at some point, I'm going to be like, man, that movie, like when that character did that thing with the music crescendoed and all this stuff, you're like, I felt that. You're like, I don't care what anyone says. I love that movie. And it's because it got something out of you. So
part of the thing that is hitting the most, especially with these ads as well, you forget it's an ad or you forget you're watching a movie and you're just fully into whatever they were selling or whatever emotion, you were feeling. So you are fully immersed in the story completely.
To piggyback on that, I think it's it can be a rarity because I feel like so many things have to go right in order to achieve art that does that. And I could be wrong here, but the times where I notice when, whether it's a TV show or an ad or a movie, where they do that, where I don't notice anything, I'm just 100% in it. It's because I feel like the director and everyone involved is very selfless and they don't care about the vanity. They don't care about, because sometimes, like, let's be honest, as artists, like, oh, I want this because I think it's cool. I want this because it's my signature thing. People know me to shoot this way, so I'm going to do it this way.
Right.
But maybe the story doesn't call for that. And so I think a great example, which is one of my favorite trilogies ever, Lord of the Rings. Like Lord of the Rings, I think Peter Jackson said specifically, we don't want any like A-list actors in this movie because it's going to take away. Like we don't want to. I mean, like we can't have Leonardo DiCaprio as Aragorn because people are going to see like Leonardo DiCaprio. No matter how great Leo is as an actor, it's got to be, or like B-listers, people that are up and coming. And there are so many times throughout that entire trilogy where they had shot some really great stuff and I would have never known. But then when I go and watch the extended edition, I'm like, oh, wow. They're like, they cut it. And I'm sure it must have been hard, but they cut it because they're like, it just doesn't serve the story. And I'm like, man, as a director myself, it's like, I don't know if I would have cut that because it's really cool. But then it's like, so whether it's a movie or an ad, I feel like if the directors, the producers, the writers, everyone's like, oh, that would be cool. It's like, no, what does the ad call for? And then for me, I keep going back to the extra gum commercial when I watch it for 10 times straight. And I'm like, why did it make me feel like this? And then I can pinpoint everything. And I'm like, oh, they had that subtle camera move. And then the audio did this and it did that. I'm like, I didn't notice any of that the first time. I just noticed It all just worked really well. And then you can see all the work that went on behind the scenes that made it so great. Versus when people just want to flash it, like look at what we can do. And you're like, okay, this is phenomenal filmmaking, but now I don't feel anything versus this is the story. And then you can dissect it after the fact.
Oh, completely, man. And I think that's kind of, that represents your journey as well, starting with the effects, because you were kind of like, I want to make some cool effects, learn how to do that. And then you're like, they lack substance. They don't matter because there's no story to match with. Like you can't just have an effect by itself because it needs to have context. So then you learn how to write stories and then you're using those techniques now to serve the story. And now they all have weight. And that's awesome. I couldn't have said it better.
So the biggest one right now is honestly our feature. Like that one, we're wrapping up the script really close and we're developing that and we're hoping within the next year we can get greenlit to make it.
Great, yeah.
So there's no other shorts other than that in the pipeline. So I'd say our feature, The Monsters We Carry, is like the most active project that we have.
Awesome, okay. And when are you planning to shoot this if you do get greenlit?
It takes place in the spring, and honestly, I doubt we're going to be in production by April next year because it is a larger project. So hopefully by spring of like 2026, we would actually be rolling.
Okay.
Is the goal.
Awesome. And have you like started casting or like what sort of level are you at the moment?
So right now, script is like 90% there. And then other than that, we have pitch deck pretty much ready to go. We have a line producer that's slowly breaking it down. It's just kind of goes back and forth because when I make tweaks to the script, then it's like tweaks, the line, it's hard for the line producer to completely like get a budget down for us. So right now we're still in that early pre-production process and as well as getting a team together. So we're trying to get everyone from cinematographers to casting and everything down pat. So then when we go to these investors to pitch, we'll have a full ready to go business plan for them.
Great. Yeah. I mean, that's a great way to do it. I think a lot of people miss that part, of being that organized. Making a feature film is difficult. And I've been lucky to have worked on a few now. But every single one was difficult for its own reasons. Is this your first feature film?
This would be, my debut feature film.
Beautiful. Have you worked on others before or mainly the shots?
Yeah, I did. So I was a assistant camera on a feature film earlier this year for my friend Hassani's film, The Beautiful Brain of Billy Bendecito.
Awesome.
That one I'm very excited about. It's a great film, and he got a couple grants to do that as well, so we shot on a really big Arri Alexa package. Company 3 is going to do the color.
Beautiful.
So I think that one, I think we're doing final edits on that, because I was also the editor for that one as well. I did the assembly cut. They're doing the final cut, and then my friend Ryan Ray's, I think, doing the post sound on that one, and Yeah, so that's the only one I've done so far, but
That's
yeah,
amazing.
assistant camera and editing.
Very cool. Okay, so I mean, well, directing your first feature film. I mean, that's. What, have you found any differences so far? I mean, I can think of a few, but I mean, the main thing probably is, the context for, let's just say, like a 5-minute film. It has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and they all have to make sense together. And that could just be one scene, but like in a whole feature film, you've got this whole other context as well. And you were talking about, subtext and things like that throughout, and reoccurring themes, or those kind of things. So how are you approaching that? What's different from a short film so far?
That is a great question. There are a lot of different things that are different. So, one, before even going into the actual filmmaking part, it's just confidence and like dealing with, for me, imposter syndrome of just like, you're not capable of doing that. That's a big project, and a feature film requires real money, not like, even if you're doing no budget, it's still you need money to do a feature film. Anything is like, so for me, it's even just going out and pitching investors, or even thinking about doing that, or working on the script. There's a lot of times where you're like, why even bother? This isn't going to be that good, or this is going to be a lot of work. And if you build it, no one's going to watch it, or all the discouraging thoughts so sometimes it could be walking a quicksand mentally just to do it. Whereas with a short film, I don't have those limiting thoughts and beliefs because, one, I've done it over a dozen times. And two, by the time those thoughts even start creeping up, I'm already editing it, So I'm like, well, it's going to be, and then by the time I'm editing, I'm doing the mix, and I'm doing all the, the color, and I'm like, oh, this is actually pretty good. Or at least for me, I'm like, this came out better than I had hoped. So
that's good.
So the first thing is the mental part of it. And secondly, it's like we talked about with the writing process and doing everything. Before all my films, I've pretty much saved my own money and or maybe had, some grants here or there, but for the most part, self-funded all my films, and I could just figure out a way to do it. This is the first time where I really learned the definition of show business. Like, it can't just be all artsy like my other films have been. It's, what's the business side? If you're going to do a feature and you want to raise $500,000 to do a feature film, people are going to want or expect some kind of a return on their investment. How are you going to prove that you can do that, especially as a first-time filmmaker?
Yes.
And then when I ask those questions, I'm like, that's really good. And I try to ask other questions that an investor would ask me. Like, if I'm trying to put my money into someone's project, I'd be asking them those questions. Yeah, what guarantees do you have? Like, and the first thing that I think of is, well, we're going to have a great script and all this stuff, and we're going to capture these themes, and we're going to try to send these messages, and this is our target audience and everything. But at the end of the day, that doesn't translate to the financial part of, okay, great, but how are you going to recoup the money, and how's this going to be a successful project?
Of course.
And so that has been the biggest thing, and the biggest undertaking for me is understanding the business side of it. How are we going to distribute it? Is this film marketable? Is it a genre that's marketable? Is there a market for this genre? How can we penetrate that market? Can we do this under a certain budget, get a team that's willing to work within that budget and within those constraints? And once it's all done, because I'm not necessarily concerned about production and post-production, because I've done it so much, it's just going to be a bigger scale.
That's right, yeah.
I've already edited a feature. I know I can do it. And, there's certain things like sound that I probably wouldn't touch on it. I'd probably want to get someone like you, or someone who's capable of doing a really good job on sound, but I'm not too technically, I'm not scared of the technical challenge of making the film. It is which has happened a few times on my shorts. Once it is all done and you have a polished film, DCP, MP4, deliverables, all ready to go, it's like, I don't know if you've seen Finding Nemo, but it's like at the very end when they finally escape and they're in the ocean in the plastic bags, they're like, now what? It's like, so many people don't think, they're like, oh, I'm just going to put it in Sundance and get a big distribution deal, and then it doesn't get into Sundance and you have a $500,000 film that's sitting there. So that has been the biggest thing, is I want to put out fires before they start, and I want to set this film up for success well beyond we even start filming. And so that's been the biggest. I know it's been a long-winded answer, but the biggest undertaking and the biggest challenge, I guess, because with a short, you spend $5,000 or $10,000 on a short, you put it on YouTube, you do festivals, you're not really looking to make that money back. But when you're dealing with other investors who are looking to you to recoup their investment, and other people who are putting not 6 months into a project, but 2 years, 3 years into a project, it's a completely different ball game, which is where the imposter syndrome comes in.
Oh my
I'm
gosh,
like,
yeah, I completely get it.
It's a whole thing.
Yeah, look, that's probably the best answer I've had for that. So that's that's it's so hard, and I can imagine so many people are asking all of those same questions. They're all the right questions, and I think I can definitely see how the imposter syndrome creeps in when there's so many variables that you got to be thinking about to make this reality. One, to even make the film, and two, then you got to sell it. And it's I've definitely been involved with projects where that has kind of happened. We've put a lot of effort in. It has taken up to 3, 4, 5 years to make something, and then it might get a distro deal for a little while, but they're not really recouping funds. It's sort of and I'm not trying to scare you either, but like it can happen, and it's I guess the more prepared you are, the more more likely you will find that success. And I think the other key thing is to set yourself up to manage the idea of success in a realistic but also positive way. So we call this manifesting, but essentially, people get that wrong all the time, that manifesting is like, wishing and hoping and then magic happens. That's just not what it is. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, with all of those questions and all those things that you're thinking about leading up to a big project like this, which is a massive step for your career and for everything, everyone, that is working on it as well. Manifestation towards a goal like this is like the perfect way to explain what manifestation is for, because you're supposed to have an end goal or something you're going for, and then you kind of work backwards. You keep asking the questions, going, well, I need this. How do I do that? I need this and this and this to do that. And then each of those things, what do they need? And then you kind of end up at the next best thing to do, which ends up being what I can do today. And then you just keep going up the chain until they're all done. And then you go, hey, imposter syndrome is no longer a thing because I've actually achieved all of these things, and you're gaining momentum while you do that. And then, you know what I mean? Like you just keep doing that. And then really it's the long game of the entire industry. Everything we do is that. How would you go about finding out that information then? Because there's a lot of important things to be, finding out about. Where would you start to look for that?
So doing the thing that I know I've personally struggled with, which is asking for help and talking to other people. Believe it or not, like, I'm a relatively introverted person. I kind of just keep to myself, even if I have a lot of friends. There's this mindset of, I just assume people are too busy, or I'd be bothering someone if I ask for help. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. And I've gotten a lot better at that in the recent years. But so for one, asking my friends who've actually done it. I have a friend, Hassani Mustafa, who's made a feature film, a successful film. I consult with him. He's kind of become my film mentor. I talk with him. He gives me advice on what to do and what he'd recommend.
That's great.
Mistakes that he's made. He's like, I wouldn't consider going this route. He's like, granted, to each their own, but maybe go this route. Don't rush into making a feature film for draining your life savings and putting all this money into it. It's like, go this route and use other people's money. So, I mean, those are just examples. Another way you could find this information is, I know it sounds kind of funny, but frankly, like using AI tools. Like, sometimes you could just pop a question in there, it gives you answers, and it doesn't just give you nonsensical answers. It gives you answers. You could use as a web search, because sometimes I'll go on Google or Reddit and I'm like, oh, there's so much information overload.
Yes.
Something like ChatGPT can just kind of lay it all out. I'm like, oh, okay, this is very interesting. But I think another way of doing it for me is, for example, our film is a psychological thriller horror film.
My favorite.
So that's done on purpose, because it's, those films can sell well, even if you don't have A-list talent or even just B-list talent. If you can create something that's thought-provoking, or if you want to create something that's scary and thought-provoking, and it has the 3 E's, it's entertaining, it's enlightening, and it's engaging, and you're like, okay, then if you can get all those things in there, doesn't matter the budget and it doesn't matter who's in it, there's a good chance people will buy it, and just word of mouth will carry the film anywhere. So, long story short, for me, it's just being smart, knowing what markets to, like I mentioned, penetrate. Horror is a good one. There's a reason we're not going into action or action comedy, because one, action can be very expensive to do, and there's no guarantee if you create a really kick-ass action film that there might be a market for it, or maybe you put it in a bunch of festivals, but people are like, oh, we can't really sell this, because you don't have Liam Neeson in it, So create something. We're not trying to go for scary personally. We're not trying to scare people. We're trying to get people to feel, and we're trying to get people to think. That's the goal of our film.
Yes.
And it's it's a mental health film. Because there is a mental health crisis happening in our country, in America, and all around the world. There's a lot of people that struggle with their mental health. And so we're like, okay, how can we do this? Not necessarily in a horror fashion, but in a way that has a bit of a horror thriller element to get people thinking and feeling while, tackling a major issue.
Yeah.
So that's really the way we're trying to go about it, is finding topics and finding genres that are untapped and then just going straight into that.
That's awesome. I mean, that's a great way to do it. I think, you're already sort of fulfilling, two parts of this, like finding a problem that needs to be addressed and then finding a cool way to address it in a creative way. That's that's the best way to do it, I think, because that is relevant, but it's also, extremely artistic. And I was going to say about the AI thing. I use ChatGPT daily. It's great. I've got it integrated into my phone, so it's basically Siri. I call it Siri Pro, and it's just I just talk to ChatGPT all the time, and it's so helpful, And there's other things I was going to say. I did mix a psychological thriller very recently, and it's like we're on the last end part now. It is in Dolby Atmos. It's a movie called Verite, coming out very soon. And we used a lot of AI to do bits and pieces of the sound mix and stuff too. So there's tools everywhere, that help make it simpler and easier to find out information, or just make things a bit easier to do this stuff. Anyway, we only have a couple of minutes left on this call. So what I might do is there anywhere, if somebody wants to work with you on a commercial or maybe for a film they're making or anything like that, where can people find you and get in contact with you?
Yeah, so the easiest way to get a hold of me is through Instagram. I'm on there all the time. It's just at Justin Melson with an M, not an M, M like McDonald's. And I also have a website, melsonandmastersmedia.com. You can see examples of my work on there. You can also, there's a contact form on there if you want to get a hold of me. And if you want to see any examples of our previous films, that'll be on Happy Fox Productions, and that is on YouTube.
Beautiful. Cool. Well, we'll link those as well, so you can go and find those. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, man. I really appreciate it. Covered a lot of cool stuff.
Hey, absolutely, man. I appreciate you giving me a platform and giving me some of your time. And this was really fun and really informative, brother. I appreciate it.
Cheers, man. Thanks again, dude. I'll speak to you very soon, and we'll talk about your new film. Maybe come and do another episode with us when that's released.
Sounds good, man. I appreciate it.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much. I'll see you later.
See ya.
Pleasure, bro.